Sonic has a lot of games, and a lot of people hate most of them, for good reasons, for bad reasons, and each of these games is divisive. Even so, there are those fans who defend Sonic's games tooth and nail. In this video, I want to talk to you about some of these games that people hate. Even so, let's try to defend each of them, if it's even possible to do something like that. To give you some context, I made a post in the community tab and put up some pictures of Sonic games, and I asked you to leave comments defending the games that people hate the most in the Sonic series. And of course, something like this was bound to get out of control, and that's exactly what happened. With over 100 comments in a short time, people started asking about certain games, and some others were asking why certain pictures were there. Man, well, there are some games here that people criticized and tried to defend, and I'm going to share some of them with you, alright? And since you're here too, if you want to join in on the fun, if this video gets a part 2, you can comment down below with the name of a Sonic game and try to defend it, even if it's a game that people hate or, in a way, talk bad about. Because those are the ones I'm going to talk about right now. Bye! One of the most unexpected Sonic games is literally that Sonic Forces, which is a game that actually did really well, sold a lot, and was really hyped up at the time of its release. Even so, a lot of people criticize this game for various reasons, and some of them we can even understand. It was a game that had a very serious theme and presentation trailer, showing the world in the middle of an apocalypse, presenting Sonic as the only savior, but that fell apart because classic Sonic ended up coming back. I know for a lot of people at the time that felt forced and unnecessary, and there was no shortage of memes at that moment. Even so, people kind of embraced the hype for this game. Classic Sonic was being used not only to celebrate Sonic's anniversaries, but he was also that character who generated a lot of interest and excitement back in the Sonic Generations days. Sega was playing it safe by bringing him back, precisely because they wanted to attract a lot of interest from old fans along with the new ones. Sonic Forces also had that thing where, man, you would have a new playable character, the avatar that you could customize with the Arzma, the Wisps, and also customize their skin, which made a lot of players wonder. A lot of people play with him and really like the gameplay style because it's different from the main games, and it also really breaks up the pace. But the Sonic Forces game ended up losing its name to a mobile game. Sonic Forces Speed Battle was pretty much renamed to Sonic Forces, and it's by far the most successful game in the series, but people even forget that it was a spin-off based on Sonic Forces. The idea of the game was basically to be a kind of free advertisement for a mobile game with racing elements, but it ended up getting so big, with so many characters and so many updates, that Sega ended up giving more attention to this game than to anything else Sonic Forces had to offer. Now, to be honest with you, I wasn't really super excited about it because at the time, another game was being released. Sonic Mania had been announced and it even came out a few months earlier, so all my hype ended up going to that one. Even so, Sonic Forces caught my attention, and when I finally played it, I experienced the same issues everyone complained about. It's a pretty short game, extremely easy, and the double boost mechanic isn't that interesting. It just makes the game much more automated. I believe that, for many people, it's still one of the most interesting games to recommend to someone new and inexperienced with Sonic because it's one of those games that has some side missions, but it's also going to be a very easy game. For someone who's not used to playing Sonic, especially games with boost gameplay, this can be a very simple entry point for someone to start playing. Nowadays, you can find it for dirt cheap. The physical copy, for example, is one of the cheapest out there. And it also features a very interesting character that Sega kind of ended up killing off, right? Which is Infinity, and to this day there's hope that they might bring him back. There are rumors and stories that they could bring him back again. Even so, there are already official documents where they said that Infinity was killed, consumed by the Precious Stone, the Phantom Ruby, which was also a highlight in the story of this game and was also abandoned. Actually, Sonic Forces did what Sega has always done with many characters from the Sonic universe. Create someone for a story and then practically eliminate them from the lore, and they're never used again. Sonic Colors. Man, I have my issues with Sonic Colors for several reasons. The biggest new thing about it is that it has the powers of the Wisps, which basically makes Sonic try to, I don't know, become a kind of Mario, but not Mario. That ends up completely changing the pace of the game. Its original version, which was released for the Wii at the time, was kind of a stopgap game since the Wii wasn't getting, say, Sonic Generations, but it was one of the most praised games on the Nintendo platform. So much so that, for many people, Sonic ended up becoming a very prominent character on Nintendo platforms because of these releases. They got a lot of attention and ended up selling very well, at least during the Nintendo Wii generation. The thing is, even though this game is 3D, the Wii's limitations probably made the company force, I don't know, a lot of 2D gameplay into 3D sections of the stage, which is understandable, to be honest. The way you progress through the stages is much more linear and without the complications from other games, especially compared to Sonic Unleashed, which even had a hub for you to explore. That was a very welcome change. Besides that, people criticize this game a lot because of its, let's say, strange version of Sonic. Sonic ends up making a lot of jokes here that really got out of hand, making him more and more exaggerated and cartoonish, so to speak. As time went by, Sonic just became really overpowered and he didn't have any story here that was truly memorable. Man, Sonic was literally running away from a black hole at the end of the game, but one of the consequences this game brought, which a lot of people hate, is the issue with the Wisps. They're basically alien beings and end up giving powers to Sonic, but they ended up being used a lot in several games that came after, especially racing games. Team Sonic Racing, for example, used a lot of Wisps here, and it was by far one of the worst things Sega could have done because it's completely incomprehensible. Kart racing games like Sonic Racing, for example, were games where you start playing and can invite more people to play with you, and they would instinctively learn what that universe is like. But the thing is, Sonic isn't actually as popular as people start to believe. Outside the bubble, a lot of people look at these aliens and don't really know what they are. I challenge anyone watching this video right now to try to describe what each of these Wisps actually does in the Team Sonic Racing game, for example. Maybe the only thing that's more understandable here is like that invincibility bubble, because that's been in the other Sonic games since forever. But come on, I don't hate this game, I just think the excessive number of 2D stages is over the top. The Wisps aren't that interesting to play with, but it had a lot of good ideas and that's really appreciated. A favorite of mine, but not for many people, Sonic Lost World. At the time, people complained a lot about the change in gameplay, because it became completely inconsistent. Here, Sonic doesn't exactly have the boost, but he does have an acceleration button, and that completely changed the gameplay. I'll tell you that I really like this gameplay because it felt the most like Sonic while still being very easy to control and much more manageable speed-wise, and it was also close to Sonic Adventure. Come on, Sega! Besides, people still believe that this game is inspired by Mario Galaxy because of the solar systems they ended up invading. There are a lot of planetoids here, and it also gave Sonic a very different art direction. It's really colorful now, to be honest. Besides that, it played with a lot of gameplay elements, and they really focused on making a game that seems like it was made for a Nintendo platform. And in a way it is, because as we know, this game was released exclusively for the Wii U at that time. If it were today, Sega would be re-releasing this game for a platform like, for example, Steam, as a remastered version called Ultimate, and it would also be released for PlayStation and Xbox. This was one of the games that also went through the same problems as Sonic Colossus. People literally noticed that there are a lot of 2D sections. Even so, the parkour mechanic is very interesting. The return of the flickies here as energy sources for the robots is quite nice. And the badniks coming back was also really cool. This is also one of the games with a lot of references, and it played things very safe. Each stage choice reminds you of some old Sonic stage remade in a new engine. Many people seem unwilling to give this game a chance for various reasons. And I believe this started back in the Wii U days, and a lot of people just go with the crowd because people hate everything on the Wii U, and it only becomes good once it comes out on another platform. I see people commenting like that, and it's rare to see otherwise. That's just how the herd mentality works. I believe a lot of people haven't even played it. To be honest, because when I see the comments, it's basically people just repeating what they've heard. Seriously, I would be happy if Sega remastered or re-released this game for new platforms because I think it would be much more appreciated nowadays compared to other games. Because like, if people speak well of Sonic Frontiers, it's because there are things from Sonic Frontiers that are there in Sonic Lost World, okay? I'm talking about gameplay controls, especially in the 3D aspect Sonic Rivals. Okay, this one also has a lot of criticism. For those who don't know, this Sonic Rivals was a PSP exclusive game, but Sonic basically takes part in races. The gameplay was 2.5D, but you were always competing against another player. It's basically a game with a main Sonic story, but it tried to give a more competitive feeling. And people complain a lot about this game because it could have been a standard Sonic game, but they chose to do something different. The biggest criticism is the wasted potential of this game. It's not that a lot of people hate it, but I think the thing is that people just didn't even get to play this game most of the time. The main mode is basically a race. But if you're playing the Sonic Rivals 2 version, you'll also have other modes like Battle Mode, where each one will fight to get some items, emblems to earn points or win in a one-on-one fight. Besides that, boss fights to see who can hit the boss faster or get more points first before the other one manages to attack. Even though it's a racing game, it also has Mario Kart-like elements, such as picking up items to use during the stage or attack opponents. Besides that, you also have a special move that varies between characters. One of the best examples is Tails, who can fly. Even so, the cool thing is that they tried to explore Sonic's 2D game and focused much more on the competitive aspect. What people really hate is that it was simply that game where everyone saw it as wasted potential. It's a game to pass the time, but to be honest, I think people didn't even really play it to draw their own conclusions. It ended up being lost over time. And seeing that the PSP could have had Sonic generations, this here is the closest we're going to get to a Sonic platform game. And man, even for 2D gameplay, it was actually pretty decent. Sonic 4 did a bit worse. At least in episode 1, it was much worse. Sonic Frontiers was that game that ended up being seen as a revolution for Sonic. Sega wants this to be the new standard for Sonic games from now on. Open world, open zones, and a lot to do. What bothered some people wasn't just the story, but also the change in perspective that the characters have. We start to understand that Sonic here is much older, and the characters are more mature, dealing with a problem that's way beyond what they can comprehend. All of them end up being a bit more understanding towards Sonic, having more motivations, and Sonic is more downbeat. This is a very melancholic game for a Sonic story, and that also ended up throwing off the pacing quite a bit, because we also end up seeing much more of a story about the past of the ancestors who worked and ran away from the cosmic being, who practically forced them to go to the planet Mobius, the big planet where Sonic lives, and to take the Chaos Emeralds with them. The game itself plays around with a lot of competitive elements. Different stages, little mini games you do so you can earn a rank. Giant enemies that end up becoming a real pain for everyone who's part of Sonic's story. And I'm serious. RPG elements that can please or displease a lot of people. But to be honest, I don't think it's a problem, okay? The thing is, the RPG element is there so you can progress in the story. That's because we're talking about a Sonic game that explores open-world elements. And that needs to be explored, showing that the progression is much more linear, so if you want, you can do everything and get to 100%. Although I broke the game's progression a lot, because you can do the fishing mini game and then you can reach the max level still on the first island. Now the question is, where does the open world aspect come from? Today, one of the things that bothers people most is that some folks criticized it because it doesn't feel like a Sonic game, and in fact, it really doesn't. The world is grayer, literally full of more desert-like figures, completely new creatures. Is this the big promise of a Sonic game? Actually, no. And that ended up bothering a lot of people. And I, even before the game was released, was already really skeptical because we knew what was going on. The problem that Sonic Frontiers was bringing was a new concept. And of course, I had played other games before, and I was already in that phase of playing one game at a time here live with you guys. So, when I went to see what Sonic Frontiers was turning into, I was really skeptical because it was going for the open world concept, and the open world game concept is something that usually goes really wrong. It's just a game filled with things for you to do, but they're completely useless and don't move anything forward, and they don't add anything to the story. Sonic Frontiers has little of that, but it's well done because it wasn't like a world generated by random codes and algorithms, like in some Ubisoft games, There's not much heart, but one of the things that's really hard to defend here is that this game was in fact a game that ended up really stripped down. Playing it on the Switch, for example, you could see the biggest problem, which is also present in other versions, but here it was worse, which was the pop-in issue. You walk a little and end up seeing a bunch of things popping up right in front of you, and that's exactly what's going on. It's a bit sad. By the way, I'm here with the Switch 2 version. You can see it here soon. I'll talk about this Switch 2 version, which for me is the definitive version, for obvious reasons, okay? The only thing we expected was that they would fix the graphic bugs, but this wasn't fixed even in the Switch 2 version. Even with all the technology, they couldn't improve this. I don't know if it's a matter of optimization or if the game was ported in a rush. Literally, Sega had everything here to be able to do their best, but it wasn't the best option. That's what they were able to do with the game, unfortunately. Even so, I can tell you it's still a good experience to play Sonic. After all, you get to know a lot more about the Hedgehog universe. You play around with the game mechanics, facing giant monsters that are basically puzzles. You reach level 99 with everything just by fishing with Big because that's what the game gives you. And you defeat giant Godzilla-like monsters pretty much in Super Saiyan style, in an epic way that only Sonic can deliver. The only really boring part is the open world, but this is something that's not actually bad in this game. It's a relatively well-made open world, but it's far from what Sonic deserved. Even so, it's a good game to recommend, especially for those who want to buy the game nowadays. Just not as a final game, man. That was released. Like, the end of the DLC is way better than facing a giant moon. I know there are other games that people talked a lot about, but I don't want to go on any longer here, okay? Also, because if I get into the era of 2D games and talk about Sonic Superstars or Sonic 4, people are going to argue here in the comments. Anyway, thank you very much, thanks, I'm out, and see you in the next video.